to go? All right, we're going to get started. Good afternoon. My name is Field Searcy. I'm with Georgians for Truth. Our press conference today, Why We Must Ditch Dominion Voting Systems. Before we start, I'd like to ask Mr. Richard Schroeder to come up and say a prayer.
A year ago, we had our rally at Liberty Square to welcome our legislators back. After the rally and prayers, we circled the Capitol 3 times, as in the Bible with Joshua and the Battle of Jericho. Here we are over a year later, and there are still hostages held in Hamas. Unfortunately, most of the hostages have been tortured and killed. We pray for the remaining hostages to be released as we transition into a new administration. We pray for the release of the J6ers. Sadly, when we finished our rally last year, we found most of our legislators had left for the day after being off for weeks during the winter break. They didn't want to talk to us. In July, our president was divinely saved from assassination's bullets. We thank the Lord for that divine intervention. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you today with heavy hearts over the injustices that our nation is going through. We rejoice with the hope of the new administration and the hope we have in you. We have a reprieve, a time of reconciliation, a time of reckoning. We have seen the effects of the illegitimate elections. The will of the people has been taken away. The electronic voting systems have taken the place of our paper ballots, and thus the will of the American people. We have lost our dominion over the earth that you gave us in the first chapter of the Bible. Lord, the dominion voting systems have taken away our dominion. Lord, we come to you today asking that you grant us favor with our legislatures. Open their eyes and their hearts to do their part in restoring justice in our nation. Holy Father, thank you for being our refuge and letting us rejoice and shout for joy. Fill us overflowing with your love for others and with a love for you. We thank you for every miracle and the hope of tomorrow. Lord, we beseech you that we may say again, as in our Pledge of Allegiance, with liberty and justice for all. It's in the mighty name of Jesus we pray. And everybody says, Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And before you sit down, I just want to demonstrate the vulnerabilities of our election system. You see his T-shirt here. It says, if you know, you know. This is the Dominion System Admin password. You can buy this on Amazon, pillows, T-shirts, whatever you want. This is a vulnerability of our system that we need to correct. So thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
As we stand on the cusp of the 2025 Georgia legislative session, it is imperative that we address the pressing concerns regarding our election systems. Speaker John Burns has made it clear, we'll listen to the grassroots. And today, the people are here to ensure that their voices will be heard loud and clear. We are here to advocate for a fundamental shift in how we conduct our elections in Georgia, specifically calling for the termination of our contract with the Dominion voting systems. Why must we ditch Dominion voting systems? Our elections have been effectively outsourced to foreign entities, raising serious questions about security and sovereignty. Consider the following points. Foreign corporation. Dominion voting systems is based in Canada, meaning our electoral processes are influenced by foreign corporation. Foreign software access. The software used in these systems has been developed by programmers from Serbia, further distancing us from our control of our electoral integrity. Foreign components. The computer chips utilized in these voting machines are manufactured in China, presenting a national security risk that cannot be overlooked. And finally, foreign law. Poll workers are required to certify tabulator tapes under the Local Authority Election Act, a law rooted in a Canadian jurisdiction. In stark contrast, There are at least 14 major countries around the world that successfully use hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballots for their elections. If they can do it, then Georgia can do it. We must reclaim control of our elections and ensure they reflect the will of the people. To do this, we advocate for adherence to existing laws. OCGA 21-2-437, confirmed by the Georgia Supreme Court in Roden, mandates a full hand count and certification of all races at the precinct before ballots are transported. OCGA 21-2-454, based on a judicial decision in Broom versus Martin, quote, "The purpose of the provision for opening and counting the ballots at the polls is to guard against any change in the ballots to be counted in determining the result, thus protecting the sanctity of the election process." Additionally, we demand that the contract with Dominion be canceled and that we pursue a refund for services not rendered as the software did not meet NIST and VVSG standards and state laws as required. Georgia's elections should not be dictated by foreign corporations or laws. It is time to return sovereignty over the electoral process back to the people of Georgia. We have a responsibility to ensure that every vote counts and that our elections are secure and trustworthy. As we move forward through the press conference, we will hear from various speakers who will delve deeper into these issues and outline actionable steps we can take together. Let us stand united in this cause and make our voices heard as we advocate for a transparent and secure electoral system. Thank you for your attention. And now, please welcome Mr. Garland Favorito, co-founder of Voter GA and preeminent election security expert.
All right. Thank you, Field, and thank you, Georgians for Truth, for putting this on. We really appreciate it. I am here to exercise my First Amendment free speech right. How many of y'all believe in the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution? I want to exercise my right in explaining why we must unplug the Dominion voting systems now. I'll give you 12 reasons in less than 12 minutes, maybe about 10. Number one, illegitimate certifications. We have learned that the system keeps encryption keys exposed in clear plain text in a database that violates FIPS 240 standards, which was allegedly what it was certified under with the Election Assistance Commission under 2005 guidelines. Anybody still using 2005 computers? The password, as Field has already pointed out, is unsecured. Not only is that the password, it's hard-coded into the system. You can't change it. And it's not hashed, which would be more security. And in addition, the passwords are generic, so you cannot trace back a transaction that's updated to an individual because they use a generic admin password. Previous states have rejected this system. The state of Texas was wise. They rejected it prior to ever us even purchasing it. Colorado has replaced the QR-coded mechanism in it because, as you know, the system accumulates votes in a QR code, which you, the voter, cannot verify even if you had a QR code reader. And then finally, Williamson County, Tennessee, has actually rejected this system after it failed to count votes in 2022 election. We found out that we have the same error that Williamson County has here in at least 65 of 67 counties surveyed. Field has already explained all the security issues. There's nothing that I can really add to the fact, but I just want to highlight again, the system is programmed and maintained by Serbian programmers. I've got nothing against Serbians. They have great water polo teams, but why are they programming American elections? No foreign entity should be programming American elections, and we should not have chips that run Chinese chips and have our systems be running on that when they have not been approved by the Department of Defense. And this, election systems have been declared as a critical infrastructure by CISA. There are numerous illegalities of the system. HAVA requires that the voting system must permit the voter to verify the votes selected by the voter on the ballot before the ballot is cast and counted. How do you do that if your votes are in a QR code that you cannot read even with the QR code reader? The U.S. District Court has found in Curling v. Ravensburger that the system does not print an elector-verifiable paper ballot, and it does not produce paper ballots marked in a format readable by the elector as required by Georgia law. The Georgia Supreme Court has ruled that hand counting law applies to ballot marking device systems, that's ours, and any ballot marked by anything but pen or pencil shall be void and not counted. That's the Georgia Supreme Court in the Roden case. Georgia law, if you're worried about the Dominion contract, well, contracts that have an illegal purpose are void in the state of Georgia, and Dominion contract specifies a barcode read by the tabulator, which, according to the citations I've just given you, is in fact illegal. The contract should be void. And finally, when the Secretary of Ravensburger was ignoring all of this, the Georgia General Assembly passed a new law that says tabulation shall be based on text portion or machine mark, not a QR code, barcode, and not any machine coding that may be printed on such ballots. That has not been implemented yet, but we owe the legislature a debt of gratitude for doing that. So what about the actual vote count failures? This system has been basically found to have made quite a number of mistakes in counting votes. In Michigan, over 7,060 votes in Antrim County were flipped from Donald Trump to Joe Biden, and no full hand count was ever conducted to ensure that the systems were counting correctly. But bringing this home to Georgia, we had a similar vote flip, 37 votes from Donald Trump to Joe Biden in Ware County. We know that from the published hand count results, the published election results from the Secretary of State's office, and we had confirmation that the hand count from the Ware County Elections Director was in fact correct. We know, and I testified at the State Election Board, that 225 ballots were not counted in Coffee County, Georgia, during 2020. That includes the recount and the original machine count. We all know that the voting system declared the wrong winners in the DeKalb County District 2 Commission primary. They continue to say that these are ballot alignment problems, but they can't explain why the system does not count 1,805 votes on that race. And finally, we know that the U.S. Senate candidate Herschel Walker's vote dropped a total of 21,000 in about 3 minutes on election night when his opponent's votes were coming up. We still don't know why that is or whether or not it was actually related to Dominion or not. So finally, I want to get into a couple more points. Remote connectivity. They've been telling us for years that this system is not connected to the internet. Hogwash. All Dominion Democracy Suite voting systems can communicate with each other via a common value, a shared X.509 certificate. Clay Parikh, our next speaker, is going to talk about that a little bit. In our Mesa County report in tinapeters.us, we found that the system is set up to be accessed remotely when it's installed, not just one component, but the database. The ports are default. There are no firewall rules to prevent outside access. And SQL Server Studio, the manipulation tool, is also set up for access remotely, and we don't even know if that's really certified. It's not on the list of certified components by the Secretary of State's office. Finally, the Dominion systems were forensically evaluated in Arizona, Georgia, and Michigan, and they all show evidence of remote access. And I'm talking about actual remote access. I'm not talking about theoretical remote access. We know that in Coffee County, the 2021 U.S. Senate race, the Dominion had accessed the system remotely there, apparently to correct a ballot rejection problem. We know that from 3 affidavits in the Curling case, 3 depositions, all corroborating one another. According to discovery in the Dominion v. Byrne case, Gwinnett County, Georgia system was accessed by Serbian programmers during the 2020 election, as well as the Michigan server. was also accessed. So remote access is not a theory, it is a reality. But yet they told us it doesn't exist. A few more forensic findings with Ben Cotton found and testified to at September 30th. Over 3,000 program files were modified on the Coffee County, Georgia server after its installation in 2020. That would have negated its certification prior to the election. We don't even know to this day why those files were modified, and the Secretary of State is not interested in finding out. Worse yet, the Coffee County server had a state uncertified compiler on it. There's no list of a compiler on the state certification, and yet this had a compiler, and it's important for everyone to understand what a compiler does. A compiler takes program instructions from a programmer, converts it into machine code, and then the programmer can execute that code on the server. So think about that for a minute. Any programmer can change the voting system after it was certified and without detection. Not only that, a bad actor can create malware and spread it using that compiler without detection. So this was just one server. What about the other 158 that the Secretary of State is still hiding from the voters of Georgia? I bet you they have very similar, if not identical, situations. And then finally, I want to mention to you that Clay Parikh, who you're going to hear from next, he actually used an authenticated copy of a Georgia server and demonstrated how it flipped votes with only 6 lines of code. So the bottom line of all this is there are unresolvable security issues. The voting system can be programmed to count differently during testing than on election day. You cannot rely on logic and accuracy testing. Dr. Haldeman has explained in his security analysis that no practical method of pre-election or parallel testing can prevent malware-based fraud, that the Dominion ICX was developed without sufficient attention to security during design, software engineering, and testing, and that in my view, being Dr. Haldeman, it would be extremely difficult to retrofit security into a system that was not initially produced with such a process. Now, a couple of final points. The leadership of the company has been untrustworthy. The chairman has testified to the Michigan legislature, and he is now subject of a criminal complaint as a result of his testimony for giving the legislature in Michigan false information, specifically in regards to remote access. In addition, you have the Eric Coomer, the former vice president of systems and security, who holds the adjudication patent on the system. According to Joe Altman's affidavit, basically was on a phone call and said that don't worry about the election, Trump's not going to win, I made effing sure of it. Now that's Joe Altman's sworn affidavit. Eric Coomer denies that, but he's no longer with Dominion. That should tell you something. And I'm not aware of any affidavit that he has signed saying that he didn't do that. And you can go look at his social media from the past, which he's clean now, and it's really some really ugly stuff. So finally, if you're relying on federal and state oversight, don't count on that either, because if you remember, Chris Krebs, the former CISA head, who was fired after lying to the committee, said that the 2020 election was the most secure election in U.S. history. At the same time, just prior to him making that announcement, the U.S. SolarWinds Orion network monitoring systems that the agencies use, the federal agencies use, had been hacked without knowledge of CISA. And that was the Sunspot, and you remember the supernova attacks. And not only were they hacked, that includes the National Security Administration. And we know all this from testimony from Colonel Sean Smith at Jeff Clark's bar trial, which I participated in. So you cannot rely on the federal government to protect you, because they can't even protect their own agency servers, even the Nuclear Security Administration. And then finally, you all remember from the Curling trial when we asked the Secretary of State's office, who is responsible for cybersecurity in the office? They all pointed fingers at one another. We got Gabe Sterling up first. He said under oath, oh no, it was Michael Barnes. Michael Barnes then testified. He said, oh no, it's not me. I don't even know anything how to do that. But our chief Information Technology Officer, Merritt Beaver, did it. So we got Merritt Beaver on the stand under oath, and he says, no, it's not me. Actually, that would fall under Gabriel Sterling's office. So they're all pointing fingers at one another, and then Merritt Beaver said, by the way, we outsourced this to Dominion voting systems. And in fairness to Dominion, they cannot actually provide security for the entire Secretary of State's office. They can only do it for themselves. So those are quick 12 reasons. Bottom line, I talked to a legislative friend here, and he says, you know, it doesn't matter what the reasons are. There's only one reason that counts, and it's that we, the people, do not trust the Dominion voting system, and that is the bottom line. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is an amazing man. His name is Clay Parikh. He is a voting system tester. He's tested 7 different voting systems. He has a top secret clearance, and he has a wealth of cybersecurity credentials. And he is the person who literally hacked an authenticated Georgia server in front of the Fulton County Superior Court just recently. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up Clay Parikh. Thank you for coming all the way from Huntsville today to be with us.
Good afternoon. I'm Clay Parikh. I have a Master's of Science in Cybersecurity, 20 years of experience, over 20 years of experience in the field. I've held all the top cybersecurity certs, but most importantly for today's conference, you need to know that I've spent a 9-year time span working in multiple voting system test labs, to include Pro-V and V. I've tested over 7 different vendors. So I know electronic voting systems, I know the requirements, I know how they're tested, or the lack of testing that goes on in the lab. All right. Most recently, I testified in the DeKalb County GOP versus Secretary of State Rathensperger case. And in that case, I demonstrated a couple of things. I cracked a password, the default admin password. And I want to say that the federal government, as far as I'm concerned, which you could tell by the 08, that it's probably existed before it was put into a default report. The federal government, the EAC, has known about this password and had listed it as an issue since 2010. All right? Now, this password was stored as a hash, which nearly every operating system stores passwords as hashes. So first let me explain what a hash is. A hash is a mathematical function that takes an input of varied lengths and gets it into an encrypted output of a fixed length, right? The problem with Dominion is they don't do what's called salting the hash. A salt is added, it's a variable that's added to keep you from cracking this one-way algorithm, because a secure hash is a one-way algorithm that can't be broken. And obviously, Dominion does not do that. All right. Many of the other passwords on the voting system were simply encrypted, and which is a horrible, horrible cybersecurity practice. Worse yet, the secret keys used to encrypt these passwords, along with the encrypting and decrypting of election data, voting system configuration files, and other confidential data, was left in plain text in an unsecured database, right, for anyone to grab. All right. During the hearing, I also demonstrated how to add and subtract votes, as you heard Garland say, for different candidates, manipulating the election results by adding with just 6 lines of code. Myself and others have already demonstrated just by changing one element within an election database table, you can basically flip the votes, and it's a lot faster. My point here is that these stored procedures outside of the compiler and everything that that Garland told you about, which is an atrocious violation of best security practices, right? You can manipulate these stored procedures without even having to recompile. So you basically, a bad guy has 100 if not hundreds, of attack vectors. And he can go undetected. All right? All right? In fact, the lack of the security of the secret keys used for encryption and decryption is one of the most egregious violations of the most basic security tenets. I would say that it is in violation of the Georgia and Dominion contract, right? I have reviewed the contract as well as several other contracts. And so what I want to do is tell you, yes, I'm a cybersecurity expert, but I've also worked for all the major DoD contractors, and I've worked on several proposals throughout my time on contracts. And so I'm used to licensing, labor rates, everything that's associated with a government contract. So I just want to reiterate that this purchase and service agreement between the contractor Dominion and the Secretary of State of Georgia, in the agreement Dominion states, Democracy Suite platform is protected by deployment of FIPS-approved symmetric AES and asymmetric RSA encryption. All right, I'm going to be really short on the RSA encryption. That's actually the X509 certificate that Garland mentioned. It's also unprotected, right? And it's in a highly vulnerable database. So what you need to know is that it's shared, meaning it's the same certificate as Arizona, Colorado, Michigan, Pennsylvania, basically any other state that uses a Dominion system. So if they get compromised and they get the certificate, they can communicate with Georgia election systems. All right. So there's 2 points to this that I want to bring out. And this is as to the AES 256, right, on the approved encryption. There are two main things. The AES 256 is military-grade encryption, and we're going to look at that just by itself without being FIPS 140-compliant. So any encryption method that does not address key storage and key management is worthless. What I mean is that I have a secure encryption algorithm tested and approved like AES 256, but I do not, configure and implement it properly. It does no good. Ben Cotton, who also testified in the court case with me, used the analogy of having a super secure bank vault, right, but leaving the combination written on a Post-it outside the door to the vault. And that's pretty much it. If it's not implemented, not configured correctly, it's worthless. It doesn't matter what the encryption. So now to the second point. Saying that the encryption method is FIPS approved is basically stating that you're FIPS 142-compliant. In the DoD world, all systems must be FIPS 142-compliant or have a solid reason why they can't, along with a mitigation plan. And I know these are things that I do at work for the Missile Defense Agency to ensure any systems that we have that, I'll use a term, what we call fielded. That's about all I can say because it's classified. Those have to be reviewed and ensure that the mitigation plans cover this weakness. All right, so many vendors like Microsoft strive to meet FIPS standard. Quoting Microsoft, Microsoft maintains an active commitment to meeting the requirements of FIPS 140 standard, having validated cryptographic modules. So Windows is telling you on all their operating systems, servers, workstations, Windows OS 11, 10, they all have FIPS 142 compliant encryption algorithms. The reason, excuse me, the reason they say that they strive is because a user, in this case Dominion, can incorrectly implement and or misconfigure the encryption method. For example, they left the secret keys outside the cryptographic module in a highly vulnerable database, right? This violates FIPS 140-2, all right? So it's my professional opinion that Dominion has violated the contract as to the Georgia contract and the others I've reviewed. I want to state that when it comes to overcharging and price gouging, the voting system vendors make the largest DoD contractors look like chumps. You just have no idea. I'm going to give you an example. They overcharge for the commercial off-the-shelf hardware such as laptops. Their service, training, and maintenance labor rates are far beyond the industry standard for the level of effort of the service they provide. And what do I mean by that? I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to tell you, this example is going to include a place I used to work. I basically hacked for the Department of Defense. So we're going to take the Threat Systems Management Office Test and Evaluation Team and the voting system vendors conducting county election work training. One group is hacking a weapon system with advanced persistent threat level attacks. If you don't know what that is, it means we go above the top secret level, look at intelligence, see what the bad guys of foreign states are doing, and then we implement that, right? We have no rules. We attack just like the bad guy was. This is quite different from a normal pen test and everything else, right? The other one is just teaching county poll workers how to use the equipment on election day, right? So guess which one charges $25 to $35 more an hour per person, right? The vendors are ripping the states off. Dominion charged the state of Georgia a total of $7,386,020.40 for training. This is out of the $44,967,752.40 contract. So my question to the residents of Georgia is, why was such money spent on training? Why do you have tabulator tapes claiming that the polls were closed on December 6th during the 2024 election? I don't think that the polls closed in the state of Georgia on December 6th, yet this tabulator tape has 3 county official signatures on it, right? Records for the 2024 election are showing dates of 2022. So why would 2024 election data have election data from 2 years prior? These are all issues. It leads to the questions: were these components even tested? Were they checked? Did they conduct LNA testing? Because setting the date would have been one of the things checked as you're setting up for the election, and then it would have been verified during the LNA testing. All right. As for money spent on the equipment, I just have to ask the one puzzling thing concerning the ICPs and their storage. Dominion documentation, the ICP, holds 10,000 ballot images. And I'm telling you this is because I've tested multiple versions of Dominion applications, and I've had all their technical data packages, and I've reviewed them. What I will tell you is every version states that same exact thing. In the state of Georgia, you vote on ICXs, which have a smaller ballot image size, right? Then I've seen a bulletin from the election division director stating the same thing and advising county officials to plan and keep an eye out for the limit being reached warning, right? Because when it hits 10,000, it will say to change out the SDK card, the tabulator. And this is all supposed to be planned prior to, not last minute, because these systems still should be testing, right? However, I have a county official, a county election director says that it's best to change the cards at 6,900 ballot images due to the ballot images getting distorted. So I just have to say, as a technical person reading that, I just laugh my blank off, because that's so ridiculous. That makes no sense, because you're basically 6,900 is 69% of 10,000. So when you're roughly 69% on storage, you're saying an image file is getting distorted. And that was in response to another election council official, right? What's bad is the total nonsense, and what's puzzling and why the tabulators are changed out when they're not even at 3,700 ballots on the card. Not even at 3,700, when the card can easily hold 10,000, right? There's no technical reason that this should be done. If all the ballot image stuff is legitimate, my question is, why are Georgians spending their hard-earned money on equipment that doesn't even live up to the documentation or the technical capabilities it claims. If Dominion can't hold 10,000 ballot images on the tabulators and their storage cards, why the heck are you wasting your money on? Right? So I want to close that. I just want to say that I've already seen a lot of very questionable stuff limited to 2024 election data that I've seen. I wish I could go into a little bit more, but I've been advised to hold that. What's more, I think Georgians should let their House and Senate know they better look long and hard at any contract with the electronic voting system vendors. Have some Georgians that have actual IT experience and contractual experience to review what's actually being implemented if it's implemented. My personal preference is that you totally just go to hand counting, training, and spend the money there, because not ES&S, Smartmatic, or Dominion are any good. And again, I can say that as somebody who's tested 7 different vendors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clay Parikh. It's great when we can have a cybersecurity expert with top secret clearance can come and explain this to you so you understand the vulnerabilities of our system. Now I want to please welcome Ms. Holly Kessler. She's the Georgia State Director of Citizens Defending Freedom.
Thank you, Field. And I'm going to switch gears on y'all a little bit. We're not going to talk about the horrific machines. We're going to talk about the wonderful Janelle King. As you are all aware, she is coming up for reappointment again. She was just recently appointed to the State Election Board this past year. I want to first thank Mr. John for his appointment. Mr. John actually is our rep down there in South Georgia, so we love him and we appreciate the help and everything that he does for the great citizens of the state of Georgia. We've been privileged to watch Janelle over the months as she learns the depths of this complicated voting system. And it's not been easy. We've all been there. We've all had to learn it. It's not been easy. She's definitely been, had some backlash, I guess would be the right way to say it. And from all sides. I've even heard from very conservative people, that they're not happy with what her decision was on a particular rule that went in or the way she voted, So this is truly a nonpartisan issue. But one thing we have seen with Janelle is that she has stood very firm and very strong and very committed to understanding the election process, understanding the concerns for citizens, and wanting to do her due diligence in what she was appointed to do. So I'm calling on all Georgia citizens today to please reach out to Speaker John Burns and express your support for Janelle, and let him know that we need these kind of people representing the state of Georgia, especially when it comes to regaining sovereign control of our election system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Holly Kessler. Next, please welcome Mr. Ted Metz. He is a co-plaintiff in a federal civil rights action lawsuit against Brian Kemp and others. Ted?
Thank you. Thank you. So this is my first time up at the podium. Most of you know that I'm usually behind the camera or off doing something with filing litigations. I have now been branded by some of the county attorneys as a serial pro se litigant. I'm very happy to hold that title. I would like to ask how many out there have heard from all of the people in government that we had the safest, most secure election ever in 2020, 2022, 2024. They keep talking about the safest secure elections ever, but as you've heard from other experts, that's not actually true. So we started filing litigation about the election system, about the ballot confirmation, about the contract with Dominion, on and on and on, starting in 2020 actually in 2021. If you recall, Senator Ligon and the Senate wrote a report that concluded that the 2020 election should never have been certified. Yet here we keep going on and on about, what a safe and secure election we've had. Well, I work with a lot of different groups, and one of the groups I work with back in July of 2023 started sending notices to all 159 county boards of elections that they're not properly conducting the elections according to the Georgia Code, and even, in fact, cited a case called Pearson v. Kemp, wherein Kemp's counsel admitted that the Secretary of State has absolutely no authority to tell the county elections officers what to do. Yet the county election officers still defer to Brad Raffensperger and his motley crew about how to run an election. So this year, prior to the election, starting in about August of this year, we, with Go Reclaim Georgia, did a project called Project 437. Through our research from some of our other friends and some of our other own research, we discovered the Roden case, Roden versus Athens-Clarke County Board of Elections, that also occurred in 2022, about the same time that Curling versus Raffensperger was almost finished, and it's about, seventh year? Ricardo's not here to tell us. So anyway, within that, between Curling and between the Roden case, there was enough there for the Secretary of State and the Governor of Georgia to stand up and start actually complying with the written law, but they didn't. So on October 31st, well, first of all, I'll go back and say that we noticed all 159 counties, including Brad Raffensperger and Brian Kemp, about our Project 437, that they must comply with 437, which is the part of our Georgia Election Code, Title 21-2, 437, that says paper ballots have to be counted. In the Roden case, basically the Roden holdings were that Georgia's elections are conducted on paper ballots, so the paper ballot rules apply. Who'd have thought? But yet we still have these electronic assistive devices that are counting the votes. So anyway, since we didn't get a response from Raffensperger and Kemp on our notice ad litem about applying 437, on October 31st, before the election, we filed a temporary restraining order, and that case number is 24 CV 4987. You can look it up. And we claimed a civil rights violation because we have the right to vote. We have the absolute right to vote, and the right to vote should be upheld using the law. Under the U.S. Constitution, you know that it says that the elections shall be on election day, and the method and manner of the vote shall be determined by the state's legislatures. Georgia Constitution basically says the same thing, that our elections will be administered according to the law. Well, here again, the law is 21-2-437 because we have paper ballot elections. How many times have you heard everyone from the Kemp administration claim that we have paper ballots? You know, we've gone in front of him and we've spoken to him and Raffensperger too and say, we want paper ballots, hand-counted, hand-marked paper ballots, and their answer has always been, we have paper ballots. But now they're trying to claim we have machine counts, we have machine elections, which we do not. Under 2 U.S.C. 9 is the federal law on elections for national elections, and it basically says there are two methods for voting, either by paper ballots or by machine. So in our civil rights claim in the court, we asked for a temporary restraining order and an injunction from certifying the election based on the fact that our rights are being violated and that they're not complying with the law. Well, on November the 2nd, that temporary restraining order was denied. On November the 4th, we appealed to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and we're still in the process of going through that litigation. The order of dismissal or denial that the judge from the 11th District Court ruled basically said that there is nothing in 437 that says anything about human action in elections, even though 437 plainly states that the votes shall be read aloud and tallied in pencil and ink on paper. It implies it implies human activity. The judge denied that there is human activity involved in elections, which takes us back to the Rodin case that says we have paper ballot elections, and the paper ballot law says we have hand counts, not a machine count. So in our appeal brief that we filed on the 23rd of December, after we found out post-election on the evening of November the 4th, that all of the election tabulator tapes basically state, we, the undersigned, certify this election under the Local Elections Authorities Act, the Local Elections Authority Act. I was on the phone with my co-plaintiff Sarah and with Sam Field Cersei, talking about this, and I started to look in the Title 21 election code for the Local Authorities Election Act. No such thing in any of the body of Georgia code. I Googled, expanded my search, and then I finally found it as being a Canadian law. The Local Elections Authority Act is a Canadian law in place in British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, and all of the Canadian provinces, as well as the UK itself. So our elections are being counted, the votes are being counted by a machine, wherein we do not have a machine system, and they're being certified under a Canadian law based on a poll tape, which is a calculator tape out of a machine that isn't anywhere in our legislation about how the votes are tabulated. Under the current law, votes are tabulated by hand by the poll workers at the precinct, and that's not happening. So that's the gist of our federal complaint for our violation of our rights, and I'll keep you informed on that. So in the meantime, it's pretty clear that our elected officials are not complying with their oath of office in applying, supporting the Constitution and the Georgia Constitution and the laws of the state. And again, that is an abridgment of our civil rights. So that's about all I'm going to say about all of that, but I will tell you what, since we have the paper ballots that come out of the paper or the ballot marking devices, first and foremost, do you think the legislature would admit to making a $150 million mistake for a system that doesn't comply with the U.S. Constitution, the Georgia Constitution, or the laws of Georgia? No, they'll never admit that. So what do? What's the workaround? Well, the workaround is to count by hand at the precinct on election day the ballots that have come out of the ballot marking machine. We're guaranteed a secret ballot, which we don't have with the ballot marking machines because you carry the paper over and anybody can see it. Of course, with the ballot marking devices, anyone in the room can basically see the mark you're making on the ballot marking device. Another story. But for right now, what we can do is make sure that each ballot, whether it's a mail-in or whether it is out of a ballot marking device, is counted by humans on a tally sheet, and the tally sheets are public record, where we can actually go and look through the ballot images from the Secretary of State's office and match up the counts per precinct. We are doomed to suffer under an illegitimately elected government because the votes are not certified. The vote, how can the election be certified if the votes are not ever counted? That's the problem we have, and that's what we need to fix. We need to have certifiable elections, and let's make sure that our legislators know that we know the law and we know that the law is being broken and is a violation of our civil rights. So get out there and activate, people. I'm turning it back to Field.
Thank you. Thank you, Chad, for all that effort and bravely standing up for our civil rights. Next, I want to welcome Mr. Antonio Jones. He is the podcaster of Gwinnett War Room. Antonio, please come up.
Thank you, Antonio. All right, I'm going to keep it brief today. I think you guys have done a great job at explaining the issues that we have with the voting system in Georgia. And thank you, like always, to everyone that's a part of Paper Please, all the data scientists, Clay Parikh, driving over here from Alabama. There's been a lot of sacrifices made. And to just be honest with you guys, the movement that we've seen as far as out of the result from our legislators, because like I said in the last time we was here, they decide the manner in which elections occur. And we could put this all to bed. I was talking to somebody on the side here. Well, it was Roy, actually, shout out to Small Town Underground. If we just got everybody in a room, presented all of the stuff to these legislators so that they can know without a shadow of a doubt that there's problems with this election process. We don't need another presentation to be created. I think the data speaks for itself, and the encounters that people have had, the election poll workers and everyone who checks these ribbons and tapes and all of that, we don't need another presentation. We need our representatives to act. That's what we need. So let's talk about what a representative is. I brought some notes this time. So what does represent actually mean? It means to speak, act, or be present officially, i.e. in place of and or for another person. I was having a conversation at a GOP meeting the other night, and I was talking to this gentleman. You know, we was going back and forth, election integrity and everything. And he was saying, well, just vote them out. And I said, well, if they're supposed to be representatives, that means that they're supposed to do at all times what the people, by large, ask them to do. That's what a representative is. It's not wait till the next election, or we'll decide, we know better than you guys. And before I get into the definition, the rest of the definitions of what a state representative is supposed to do, there are two guys, one by the name of Brad Raffensperger. I'm sure you guys have heard that name before. And Gabriel Sterling. Both of them walked right through this hallway, and we walked up to them. You know, me and a couple of other people, we had questions. We really don't have time. Both of them kind of ran in the office and shut the door. This is what we have as our representatives. You're nothing but garbage, you know, kind of like what Joe Biden said. This is kind of results that we get. But I challenge everybody in this room and that may be watching this, you better get something for your vote this time around. Because if they think that this time they're going to put us in a position for us to be saying, oh, well, we can't vote for the Democrat, so we got to vote Republican. I challenge you guys to say, think again. You better get something out of your vote. I'm willing to hold my vote, and I'm not telling anybody in this room what to do today. But if this keeps being a scenario, we're going to keep getting played over and over and over again. And the time clock's running out. If you look around, look at all of the mixed-use development that has been coming into our different suburbs and what is it? My brain escaped me. But in rural areas. This comes from, oh, wait till the next time. We can't do anything about this. When the infrastructure is literally crumbling in the suburbs in some areas. I'm in Gwinnett County. Let me get to this, y'all. I don't want to get too far off because I know we've been here. All right, so what is the job of a legislator? Let's go through it. A state legislator has several key responsibilities. One of them is lawmaking. They propose, debate, and vote on bills that can become state laws. These laws cover areas like education, health, criminal justice, taxation, and more, tailored to the needs of their state. Okay? Representation. State legislators represent the interests of their constituents. That means the people in this room, the people in their district. They communicate with their voters, listen to their concerns, and reflect these in legislative decisions. How often has that been happening? Or have we just been getting tossed a bunch of peanuts? Go away, we can't deal with that right now because we're in an election cycle. Oh, so-and-so can't speak up for that right now because of the position that they're in. Well, guess what? On November 5th, a sweeping victory was reached by we the people. You know why? Because we are sick and tired of the career politicians, and we voted for the outsider again. Another responsibility, they're supposed to be over the budget and appropriations. They're involved in the state's budget process, deciding how funds are allocated across the various state programs and services. This includes both proposing and approving budgets. Oversight, they oversee the execution of laws by state agencies. This involves committee work where they can investigate, audit, and hold hearings on how the state government functions. You know, like elections. That may be one of the things that they need to hold some hearings on. But we've got enough data. We've got enough evidence. The question is, are the legislators going to act and give the people what they want? That is the question. And again, if they think that the people are going to continue to cast their vote in their favor, show up, be poll watchers and all of that, I just don't see it this time around. We have to have something for our vote, and that's for you guys to do what the people are asking you to do. Constituent services. Legislators often help constituents navigate government services. I wonder how many of you guys behind me have gotten any callbacks from anybody in some of these maybe election offices to say, hey, here's where you go, here's what you need to do to take care of your problem.
Never.
Resolving state issues with agencies to assisting with local problems that might require legislative attention or advocacy. Oh, you guys have a problem with the election? Let me tell you the person to talk to. This is how you're going to get it done. Because we know you guys don't have anything to do other than to drive to the Capitol and have people like Clay Parikh drive over here from Alabama to let his voice be heard about an election. Policy development. Okay, they engage in the policy research, policy debate, and the formulation of public policy initiatives. Make sure you guys follow us, the Small Town Underground in War Room, Gwinnett County. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Antonio. And now, to close it out, I want to bring up Mr. Sam Carnline. He's the co-founder of Georgians for Truth. Sam, come on up.
Thank you, people. In the movie Cool Hand Luke, Paul Newman and George Kennedy had a fight. And Cool Hand Luke, Paul Newman, kept getting up and getting knocked back down and getting up and getting knocked back down by a much bigger opponent. We're just common citizens. We're common citizens that have found issues in our election system. And it doesn't seem that our elected officials are as concerned about it as much as we are. A Rasmussen poll, and whether you like polls or don't, a Rasmussen poll says 62% of Georgians do not trust Georgia's election system. Well, you know, if 20% of Georgians don't trust Georgia's election system, it's time to change Georgia's election system. But when 62% don't trust Georgia's election system, it's past time to change Georgia's election system. There's a little country over in Europe called Germany. There's 80 million people in Germany. They vote on a hand-marked paper ballot. Florida, our neighbor just to the south, they vote on a hand-marked paper ballot. Alabama, our neighbor just to the west, hand-marked paper ballot. Legislators, we want hand-marked paper ballot. Right. We want counted at the precinct. Right. And we want to know that our elections are secure and accurate. First, accurate, and then secure. But we want them secure and accurate. I don't know, that goes both ways, I guess. We have to have secure elections to have accurate elections. I thank you for your time. I thank you for everybody coming. And right now I want to get down on a little solemn note. There's a friend of a lot of us who passed away last year. He was a great friend to this state, a great friend to election integrity and election security. And I'd like to dedicate this press conference to Judge Paul Nally. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we like to end up with song. And Antonio, let's lead them in the Star Spangled Banner.
We'll do it together.
All right.
You ready?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? I want to thank these people behind me who keep coming like Cool Hand Luke. And we're going to keep coming until we're successful in changing the way we vote in our state. God bless you.
That's right.
That concludes the press conference. Thank you very much for attending. Thanks for all the volunteers here.